at 6:29. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Correspondence, visitors, and public comment. Is there anyone in the audience here who'd like to make public comments? Seeing none. We have no one online. Anything from board members? Any correspondence to report? All right. Next we have agenda review. Any agenda amendments, Julie?
I do not.
I have none. All right. I guess actually first I'll say, Christy, welcome.
Thank you.
First meeting with us, I believe. Or
Well,
were you-
there was a summer one.
The summer one, okay. First one in the fall, here we go. School's in
First
session.
school year one.
All right, next we have our fall athletics.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I believe agenda review. I like this new format we're considering, but in reading if we read the administrative reports and we have a question, is there an opportunity to address that?
Yeah.
Or is that something we just don't do?
I think that is an oversight of this format, and I think before we leave agenda review, we should add, well, we have the MVU administrative team here tonight, so we should add an item for administrative review, comments, questions. Why don't we put that right at the top here before we jump into athletics? And I think that will need to be a fixture going forward.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Don. All right, so we'll do that first. For any of the MVU administrative team who's here with us tonight, are there any general questions after reading the written reports that were submitted, knowing that we'll jump to athletics separately here in a moment?
Well, since I raised the issue, first I want to thank you. I thought it was a very good report. It's giving me a good idea of what's going on. Of course, nobody ever knows exactly what's going on. In line with that, will it be next meeting in September will be here? That may be too early, but at some point will we get data on our comparative enrollments for this year to what it was a year ago?
In the report, I did the fall report, and there it talked about the athletes from a year ago. So we can do one.
By grades or whatever.
We can do one by grades.
I'm just thinking, and because, and let me tell you, the thing that I'm really most interested in, how are we doing with what I call tuition students? What students who come from towns where they pay tuition and all that stuff. And this is not something that I expected tonight, but since their cycle won't bring us back here for another year and a half or so, it might be nice to know.
Okay.
And I know, Dan, you'll do this, and I'll try to remember to tell other administrators, just because I ask a question doesn't mean I'm the only one that wants the information.
Sure. No problem.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Any other questions for the MVU administrative team? Yeah, Peter?
Hiring update, so fully staffed, is that normal or no?
No.
Okay.
That is not normal. We find ourselves in a very fortunate position. When I went to the VPA conference, Vermont Principal Association conference in early August, every administrator I spoke with was still looking to hire multiple positions. And it was not bus drivers, it was paras, it was science teachers, it was math teachers. And upwards of one school district still had 14 positions they were looking to hire for. We got on ours early and had contracts due back earlier, and we kind of got out there ahead of the curve. And as a result, we find ourselves in a very fortunate position of being fully staffed.
Well, that's excellent news because it's been on the news all over that schools are looking for teachers and more recently this morning, bus drivers like you talked about before. Do we have all the buses running? Because I know they were talking about students being on the bus for an hour and a half. Are we having those same issues?
In my conversations with the bus companies, they're doing okay. The ones up north here are. If you take a look down in Chittenden County, there's still a lot of issues down through there, and that's, yeah, I won't get it, but yeah, it's, for the most part, the bus companies are doing pretty well as well, even for those positions. I think we still have a para position or so that's open, but we've kind of had that position open, but, you know, for the most part, we're meeting the needs of what we have right now.
I would say the place that we're thin is in substitutes. So whether it's substitute bus drivers, substitute teachers, so any extras, right? So there's those positions are still open. So if there's anyone watching,
We would welcome applicants and
if they would like to
substitute
come in and
teachers.
sub, that would be fabulous. But I would say that's the place that's pretty thin for us, but yeah, we are lucky.
Which leads me, Mr. Chair, to ask, how are we doing custodial maintenance staff? I know we have a good leader, but is it full?
Peaceful? Yep, we've got another one on, starting today. He can speak to that a little bit later on during his report, but we are, and I think, you know, as you may have seen walking through the building today, it's in great shape.
Yeah.
It looks really good. And, you know, thanks to Jason and his crew, the building looks in great shape.
Great. Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
All right, we'll move along to the fall athletics update. So John Lumsden's here, athletic director. John, thanks for the written report. Everyone had a chance to take a look at that. So I'm just going to open it up for the board right now. If you have any questions for John or any comments about MVU athletics.
If not, I have a few updates. We're up to 310 student athletes, so we have registered, I think, about 10 more students in the past week. Spirit Week is starting next week. There's a flyer here. We have tie-dye, neon day, flannel day, crazy sock day, spirit day, all starting next Monday. And then on Friday the 16th of September, we'll have practices, and then we'll feed our student athletes pizza and drinks, and then we'll have a parade down in Swanton at 6. There'll be high school dance from 7 to 8:45, and we have fireworks at 8:45 here on the campus. Also letting you know that as an athletic fundraiser that I'm doing with Angela Carr, I'm going to pair with her, and we're going to have a craft show here on Saturday, October 22nd, from 9 to 3 in the gymnasium. Right now, part of the hallways, all our spots are filled now in the gymnasium. So I'm excited to, you know, put one on. I've done one with Angela before at Hiking Elementary School, and money proceeds will go into the athletic fund to help pay for pizza and drinks, I guess.
I have a question about the coaching contracts that we issued.
Yeah.
We just heard Dan mention how we had some success getting out ahead for other staff.
Yep.
So I noticed here's a seasonal contracts are issued and signed prior to the first practice the coach attends. So I kind of think sometimes that might hurt us. And when I say us, I mean particularly our kids. I'm wondering if there's some way we could sign coaches on 2 months before the first practice, or sometime way before. And I also say that with something in mind, like if the community really looks to see, this is particular for varsity program coaches, the community really wants to support varsity coaches, and I think most varsity coaches know that they need the community to really feed them. So if we go a long period of time, let's even say 8 months, without knowing who the varsity coach is, that hurts our kids, and it hurts all those in the feeder program looking to support the varsity program. I don't know what the answer is, because these are seasonal contracts, but in my perfect world, we would know if we want to retain a coach like a month after the season, and then we get them under contract for the next season, because there's off season. I know during the school year, the varsity coach can't be involved coaching that age group, but at many schools, the varsity coaches are involved in other things that make the varsity coaches program better, particularly in the summers. So I think that, it just, there's no time frame on there, so I think it hurts us. We could have a coach back out 2 or 3 weeks before the start of the season. And then at the end of the day, that hurts our kids, and I don't know if I just see an opportunity there to tighten that up or write it if we can. I don't know. Is it not an issue, or we have lost coaches right before the season starts sometimes.
Yep. I have a meeting next week, and I can bring that up in my meeting with when do athletic, is it a season before, is it a year before?
Right.
2 weeks before, I don't know, but it would be a good idea to see where the rest of the state is. But I certainly agree having them earlier would help. But then I also think about what happens if someone decides 2 weeks before the season starts that they can't do it, don't want to do it, and they sign a contract, let's say in October, and we want them the following year, what will happen? I guess I'll have to look into that as well.
Yeah,
And they do sign a contract.
I would look at like a teacher's contract. They signed it. We do let, well, it's sort of depending on the circumstances,
Yeah.
but if it's just because they found a better coaching job somewhere else, that's hurting our kids.
Right.
So I think that's something to consider. And similarly, if we receive a letter of resignation, I don't know why we wait. Like, why aren't we posting it right away? Because again, I think it would make us more competitive potentially, but more importantly, the community really wants to know, what are we waiting for? We really would love to meet and greet the coach and offer how the feeder program is willing to support that. So those are a couple of my feelings on the coach's contract. But, and I think, I have only anecdotal evidence that it kind of hurt us this fall season. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think there's an opportunity there for us.
I can't seem to pull up the report right now, but are you gonna give us the numbers that your students that you have now participating by sport?
Yep. Can we pull that out?
That's coming up.
Sure, I can, let me see if I can share it.
It's a link.
inside the school report.
But I didn't see it, I'm sorry, I didn't see it even in there, so
I linked it on the bottom of the MVU.
that's where I should have done it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Derek, can you make that go away? Thanks. Can you see that, Sean?
Yep. So, Donna, to answer your question, as of August 31st, there were 292 and now there's 310. I think the highest was pre-COVID. I think the one in the fall had 305 student athletes.
When I first saw this, something went through my mind, unless you see a mistake. I guess I'm sensitive to it because of the MVU board carryover. But we have like 2 new sports teams this year.
Yep.
Okay.
So I introduced middle school flag football. It's a program that has been talked about for many years. After talking to the coaching staff prior to having my coach leave and hiring a new coach, it was important that we start talking and doing something about starting our middle school flag football program. So it is flag football. It's not run through our recreation department. Our school, so it's Missisquoi, Milton, U32, Mount Abraham, are the 4 schools that are involved in flag football. It's a model that we have to use if we're going to go through our school, through Vermont Principals Association. And right now there are 16 certain athletes who have signed up for that. There is a game schedule that play on Saturday mornings in like a round robin type format. We actually host U32 Milton Mount Abraham on Saturday, I think it's October 1st. So I'm excited to start that program, and I know my coach is really excited to start feeding, having a sort of program into his program. Junior varsity boys volleyball is another new sport that I introduced this fall. Last winter, there was a couple young men who came to my office and said, we want what the girls have, and they have a team. And I said, well, give me some names of students that would participate, and I have it on my desk if I forgot to bring it, but they wrote down what they wanted, and they had a list of 18 young boys who were interested in participating, and of the 18, 11 of them have signed up. So those are the two new sports that I
And
introduced
I
this year.
think you know that I came on the board after the football fiasco with Dennisville. And for years, I finally pushed the board and put money in the budget for football. So you do have the money in the budget for these sports.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep. And I know for the young people, those out there watching practice today, they're absolutely thrilled to be out there. And, it's exciting that anytime you want to start something new, it is exciting. We're going to have our challenges ahead. But obviously seeing 16 young people that want to play the sport is a good indication of where the program could be going in years to come.
Do you have a sense of how many of those kids would have, used to play soccer, for instance, for both
Always a good question.
the football and the volleyball,
Yep.
or they knew two
Yeah.
athletics?
And I'm
'cause
finding that even though the varsity program started, we're not taking away from the soccer program. As an athletic director, you really need to think about if you're going to start something new, what's going to be taken away. And there is not a correlation. In fact, I know there's a young man who plays on the varsity soccer team who is now punting on our football team. So, but we're not taking away other members, into having the football program.
Looking at the cross-country numbers, they look really low. 5 for the middle school and 10 for the high school, and there is a lot of competition now where there didn't used to be with football, and you had golf. I know moved some years ago from the spring to the fall, and now we got the 2 volleyball programs. Just worried about that program.
The cross country. I think it comes in waves. Having I think it's recruiting, trying to get kids in to, partake into an activity. It's lower than usual, but hopefully, we can continue to build that program.
Any other questions?
Yeah. So there's no, so field hockey, is that like lacrosse?
Sorry,
Field hockey, is that lacrosse? That we're talking about?
we have no lacrosse here,
So it's just
which
field,
is strictly field hockey.
which is what?
Fall sport.
No, I mean, it's a real question.
Oh.
So it's not like lacrosse, it's not ice hockey, it's just field hockey?
Correct.
Wooden sticks.
Played on grass.
On
with
grass.
sticks.
And that doesn't translate to
Girls.
enough players to play like ice hockey?
It does.
So is it both then?
Different season.
No, different seasons.
So, but those cross over to like the winter season and those become hockey?
Some of the girls that do play field hockey do play ice hockey.
The best
Is there-
way
they're
to make
different-
is to show up somewhere.
We don't have any winter sports
This
up
is
here.
just fall sport.
This is just fall.
It's just fall.
So
I feel you
I'm
have a
just,
lot of soccer players that play ice hockey as well.
Yes.
so normally does that translate into the winter that we're having a boys and girls hockey team?
Correct.
And there's not enough, how long has it been since it was like contact football? Like, is that just kind of statewide that it's moved to flag football for high school?
No, not high school, middle school.
No, middle school sports is flag football. If you're running your football program through a recreation department such as St. Albans Steelers, then you can tackle at the 7th and 8th grade level. We're not doing that.
And from what I thought you said, no schools are, is that VPA does not allow
Correct.
at middle school, it has to be in the state of
Correct.
Vermont, if it's through the school, has to be touched or flagged for 7th and 8th grade.
And
You
then
would, okay,
the high school report for football, is that enough for a full team?
we're always looking for more. 25 is, I'm gonna say 22 is probably the minimum, so we're in that area of anywhere between any 30 would be a great number. I think a couple of years ago, we might have like 20, and the most we might have had it maybe would be 30, but 25 is, we don't want to go any lower than 25.
And the last question is, how are sports determined that we're gonna offer or not offer like a sport? Like, is there like an interest level that has to like
I think
come
there's
about?
an interest, you know, can it sustain availability? You know, I can't have, you know, what's our gymnasium look like? If I have 8 basketball teams in the wintertime, you know, what other, and a team wants to go and use the gymnasium, what does that look like? So obviously facilities would be an issue.
So like for instance, like I don't see that. Is that a season thing or we don't do
That's a winter
That's
sport.
winter sport.
that?
Yeah.
Okay. But if like enough students got together and said, you know, for spring, like I'd like to play tennis, but it's not been done. Is that just something that is done on an ongoing basis?
And ongoing, but also if I can match up with some of our students here that can partake in and play on another team, for example, another school. For example, we've had kids do, actually last winter, we had some of our student athletes participate on snowboarding, but they were practicing with the St. Albans team snowboarding. They represented us as a school in Missisquoi.
Got it.
So, working with other athletic directors in your area, we have a player from Edisburg who's playing football for us. So,
So John, I'm probably asking the question for a different reason that football, when you look at football for flag, Alberg and Sheldon send us students.
we have a student from Alberg who is starting to, probably tomorrow.
The reason I ask is if they come here and play flag football, they might come here for high school as a tuition student.
Correct. Yeah.
I have 2 questions, if you don't mind. First one has to do with facilities, in terms of, I mentioned basketball. Ever since I've known, there's been a tension with the Swanton School and who can use the basketball courts and everything else. So I wanted to ask you about that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But then the second one I wanted to ask you about is, do we have some kind of idea of how many of our students are in sports, or what percentage? Because I imagine a lot of these, like you said, the basketball, then they go to soccer, or they go to soccer, then they go to basketball, or field hockey, cross country, field hockey. So oftentimes it looks like we got all these kids in sports, but really we don't. It's the same kids and the same. And I just wonder if there's something we do about that, or it's really 2 different questions.
Yep. So let's go for the first one.
Okay, that's
The
easier.
facilities, yep. So anytime that Swanton and Highgate do not use their elementary schools during the wintertime, if I'm able to put a middle school team in their gymnasium for practice, that's what I do, which frees up our gymnasium. So I'm always communicating with Swanton athletic directors and Highgates, what is their gym use and at what time they're not using it, so our teams can come in and use it. The second part of the question was, yes, there are several students who participate on 2 teams. For example, that football player won and then playing the boys soccer. Cross country has one student who's doing cross country as well as playing JV boys volleyball. But the decision on whether that can happen or not is made between the 2 coaches, and if that is acceptable for their teams. And if so, if both the coaches agree, then that student athlete can go and play 2 sports. But it doesn't happen often. It might be just a handful, I'm going to say less than 5, if that's happening.
Well, and actually, I think my question, you're
Okay.
answering it in terms of how much are they actually playing.
Yep.
I was actually thinking of, what do we do to, there are some kids whose parents played sports, so they're playing sports, and they know the coaches, and they have friends who know the coaches. What about the kids that don't? What about the kids that, I know we have football, and that started because there were some kids who wanted to sport because they weren't the others. But how do we deal with that stuff? I mean, there's a heritage in this. What's that?
Not all the kids wanna play sport.
No, none of them want to,
Right.
but I think there also is a heritage kind of thing that goes on around here. And if your parents play, they play, and I just wonder how you do for some of that.
You know, making a decision of flag football, obviously, it's something that we, you know, I didn't want to do it, obviously with pre-COVID and, you know, during those times, I think if this is the time to start the program, you know, we can talk about it, and then we had COVID, and then I wanted to see, you know what, this is, if it's gonna work, now's the time to do it. But the same thing, you know, anytime you're starting something new, you know, I think it has to come from students, as they do with that JV volleyball team, and I commend them of, here's what I want you to do, and here's how they did it, and, you know, we'll move forward, you know, with their schedules. So, you're right, I mean, I think 300, as a fall, you know, a season, anything over, you know, I think 310 student athletes participating. I don't know how many student athletes or how many students there are in our sport now, but I would say that's gotta at least be a third.
About
That's
7-7.
good.
About 7-7.
So it's almost half.
Yeah,
So-
I'm not saying that, I
Yeah.
mean, and there's all kinds of teams people can be on. It
Yes.
doesn't have to be sports. I just was wondering,
Yep.
I just wonder if you have the same culture. I know that other groups can start up if they find a teacher, if they find, you know, club.
We start as a club, correct?
Right, so you can do that in
Yep.
sports too.
40% of our student 40% of our students are student athletes right now.
I think
That's
that's
it's a
big.
pretty good percentage of
Yeah.
kids who are involved in something.
Yeah, that is.
Devin, can I just follow up on Terry's question?
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
So John, taking Terry's question moving forward, how many of these students right there are now gonna go play a second or third sport? I mean, I'm trying
You're
to,
talking about like playing basketball and playing hockey, a majority of our kids are free sport athletes.
uh,
Yeah.
so when you see these numbers, you see it again in the winter and the spring, doesn't necessarily mean a whole new group of students, maybe a few new ones, but most of them are taking a sport based. Okay.
And we really encourage, you know, our students here to be multiple, playing different teams, not just specialize in just one.
Last question maybe, you in charge of music and drama?
No.
In some schools, the athletic director has all extracurriculars. Something that the principals do at the end there, something to think about in the future.
About putting him in charge of drama? Yeah.
And band and chorus.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on what Terry said, was bringing up, and our structure really, now that we are an Mvsd, because it really starts way before high school, junior and middle school, in my experience. It has to, you know, I was coached little kids when I had way more kids than I wanted, because I could only deal with, you know, but they just filter off as they get older, and then you're left with sometimes barely enough. That said, I think the younger grades, 3, 4, 5, 6 are, so you really need the recreation departments to partner. But at the 5, 6 level, which, you know, Devin and I have had numerous conversations, I think there's an opportunity for us to improve as an MVSD there as well. Don't know the answer to that, got some ideas around budget time, but that now that we are the MVSD, I think there's a lot of possibilities there to improve the feeder system, 5, 6 level, which would potentially bring even more kids into the ones that aren't the cultural or tribal sports families. It might be an opportunity.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about at our coaches meetings, we want all our student athletes to, you know, have a positive athletic experience, and it really doesn't matter what grade or what sport, but we want them to feel good about themselves and feel good about what they're doing, and to bring that, you know, the climate and the culture and to be positive within our community.
Peter, you have a question?
Yeah, so I was pleased to see that you're still meeting with the players and coaches to attend hazing, harassment, and bullying training. As we all know, that in the state, a neighboring district had a real issue last year, and we had our own issue here and that was with the fans. So I'm just wondering what we're doing to prevent that in the future and, get a atmosphere where we're not yelling at the refs and calling names and how we're handling it.
Yep. So Steve Messier did an HAG presentation on our parent-player coach meeting we had back in August. And then Rick Farnham did a presentation for parents talking about being positive and so on. And I also ran it in the letter itself about every high school should be reading the VPA message. We kind of put our own 2 cents in this, so that all our students, as well as our fans, this has to be played and announced prior to game starting, and obviously being visible out there, do the best that we can. Not only is it, it could happen on the field, but also off the field, as you talk about having parents, but having that education of having Rick Farnham come in and talk to those parents about what we want to do, prior to games, and talking about how we can support our student, our child, is really what we're trying to do.
He also came in and spoke to your coaches as well.
Correct.
Prior to.
Yep.
So there will be a presence as much as you can at
Yep.
games and stuff.
Yep.
Would we ever reach a point where we might say to a fan, you're not allowed to
It has happened.
Oh,
Yep, it
I mean,
has.
it's not something like Seaton, but I'm going back 50 years ago over in Long County, and people were told you cannot come to the rest of the season.
I have a follow-up question on that, if that's okay. And that is, years ago, I mean, it's been a while, I remember saying, these fans are like out of control. I don't think it's good sportsmanship, just from some of the things I was seeing. And I was told, that's just the way it is. And I wonder, did we have these kinds of things in place a couple of years ago when all this was still happening? And I guess my question is, how do we know this is effective, and what do we,
I think maybe years past it was probably tolerated, and it was fine because that's what was done before. But I think there's to a point where we just say enough's enough, and we need to do something different.
And we've gotten to that point.
And we've gotten to that.
And
And
the
that's why
kids and
we're-
everybody agree with that.
Yep.
That's good. That's good.
I think too, I don't know if you've experienced it yet, John, but I'm sure we're going to with the referee and umpire shortages. I think we're gonna be begging for refs, so no one's gonna say anything. Because they won't play the game if you don't have
You're
enough
right.
refs, right?
And without officials, there's no game.
Yeah.
And, there's only 47 football refs, and we talked, I think it's been on TV. Some games are on Thursday night, some games are on Sunday, because that's what they have to do. So it's, yeah. So if anyone's interested in referee and umpiring, just let me know.
That's a good way to close it out. Request for help. Perfect. All right, thanks, John.
Thank you.
All right, we'll shift gears here and we'll move on to our communications plan, which Julie, I think, is going to start with a brief presentation, right? We're also going to have a discussion afterwards because I do want board input on this. It's some things you'll see have begun and are in place, and there's still more work to do. So from our end as well.
I can just.
Yes, so I want to introduce you all to J.R. Cox. J.R. is our communication professional who is working with our entire district. And you may recognize him because he also works for Northwest Public Access.
Yes.
Standing
So he has been to some of our board meetings before. I wanted to start with just why we need to focus on communication. And our primary, this is a quote that I saw in a newsletter about communication to superintendents. And it really shared that the primary purpose of the school leader is to bind the district and the community together in support of a powerful vision for student learning. The only effective tool for meeting this challenge is a comprehensive communication plan. And we have had discussions at this board and privately that we feel as if our plan is scattershot, right? We try a little social media, we try our websites, we try in-person meetings, we try a lot of things, but that it's not necessarily comprehensive. So a long-term goal of the board and our administration has been to increase our communication and engagement in the community. Good communication doesn't just happen, it's planned and then executed. And we want it to start small but mighty, right? We can't be doing a million things, but we want to be doing things that are high leverage activities that will really start the communication and engagement rolling. So in order to do that, because it is a lot of work and it takes a lot of coordination, we moved forward to hire J.R. Cox as a district communication professional. And now I'm going to stop talking and let him do the rest, and you just let me know when you want me to advance slides.
Yeah, you can go ahead and move to the next one. The getting started, it's covered up here, but yeah, collecting data, establishing metrics, and understanding needs. So I met with a couple of you, board members, administrators, community members, parents throughout the district, and had conversations because one of the things because this is a new role for the district and a new role for me, it was, like I say, understanding what we need to do. What are the communication needs? What are the challenges we are facing? What are the things that we would like to move on to? So that was one of the things that I brought up in each of these conversations, was basically, what challenges are you facing right now? And what ideas would you like to implement in the future? So moving on to the next slide. Basically, I took notes throughout all of these meetings and put everything into a spreadsheet and started to sort of see what was popping out, what things were getting mentioned a lot by several parties, and these were the 5 major themes that I identified. The calendar of events, pretty self-explanatory. All community members and people that schedule events, everybody was interested in seeing what everybody else is doing. So that's one of the things that we're interested in as well. School and district websites were identified as kind of a sticking point for a lot of people. The board information stream, that was something that I heard mostly from board members and some of the administrators as well, was just, how do we give you the information that you're looking for, more or less? And parent community outreach, education and engagement, basically just improving the community's level of knowledge about what our district is doing, what's happening in the schools, instead of just the sort of, big points that come out throughout the year. People are more interested in what happens on a day-to-day basis. And then MVU communications and concerns. MVU, I think, came up, and so it's fitting that we're here at MVU a lot as, sort of a symbol of what the district can be, sort of this unifying thing that applies to everybody within the district, while also having its own communications challenges and parent engagements, situations, that sort of thing. So moving on to the next slide, what I did was sort of establish 3 things to start with for myself. These are the 3 main points of focus for me right now, which is creating a constant content stream which touches on a few of those themes that I identified. Revealing more of what's happening in the schools. We're putting that on social media. That's part of the work that's already begun. I've established a relationship with Kate from the Messenger and would like to, have a little bit more influence over the stories that get out there in the press. And of course, in person is always, an effective way, especially in this community, of communicating and getting ideas out there. Revamping the websites, that's another, a little bit longer term goal, but that's something that I've started looking into. I've done a lot of research, looked at a lot of websites, of other districts and all of the websites within our district. I think there's a lot of areas we can improve there, and that's something that I'm working on now, sort of doing that redesign, and then refining the information reporting strategies in key areas. And that's something that's going to be coming up sort of intermittently as, like it says the budget there. We're going to start working on that probably next month, and how we can sort of better prepare the community for the upcoming vote that's, it's months away, but we don't want it to be a shock to anybody. The monthly newsletter, that's another thing that you guys probably saw before this meeting, was the newsletter that we just released. And so that's something that I'll be interested to hear everybody's feedback on. But moving on, we can kind of talk a little bit more about the timeline. August was a lot of me sort of creating systems, generating data, trying to sort of set the benchmarks, find where we're at, so that 6 months from now we can kind of reflect back and see, have we improved, where have we improved, what can we improve more. And so going to September, what I'm working on a lot now is collecting more content. I've been taking a lot of photos, been getting into the schools a lot, and it's been really fun. I actually had my first classroom visit today and got to see Ben Green, who's one of our excellent teachers, and it was kind of exciting to see that great work that happens just every day. And of course, we're also still, I'm doing some website design ideas, mocking some things up that I'll be getting feedback on, and we can kind of move forward from there. October, definitely want to get more of the website design ideas locked down, and again, starting on the budget's sort of communication plan. Moving into November, we'd like to have the development started on the web design, and then in December, hopefully getting some things finished up with the websites, and looking back, reflecting, has our social media system been working? What can be changed, what can we do better, and sort of where should we go from here? So that's my plan for the first 6 months, and if you could move along, Julie. This is just an example of some of the things that I've already started doing. As you can see, many of you probably saw on Facebook and on the website that we did the construction approved announcements, which I think rolled out really nicely. The monthly newsletter, hopefully everybody felt that it's read easy. That's something that I'll continue to sort of refine based on what is working and what is not. And of course, just getting a lot of photos, smiling faces, exciting things. This is actually a link, which we don't have to watch the video, but this is a little 1 minute promotion I put up on Facebook, just of teachers talking about how excited they are to start the new year, and that's gotten a lot of positive feedback on social media as well. So,
Just looking at your engagement numbers.
yes. Did you have a specific question about that?
No, just that, the content you've put up already has really started attracting people.
Yeah. It was. I wish that I had sort of taken this snapshot last week, because it measures either every 28 days, every 14 days, or every 7 days. Last week, our engagement was up like 20,000% because. Obviously, just the way things get posted, you get some funny numbers like that. But the important thing, I think, is these net followers, where we're up 6 new followers. We're now to 918. We were at 912 when I began. I'm not sure. I did get the sense that we do kind of get a trickle of new followers on Facebook. But 6 is a good number. I think that it'll continue to increase. And that's one of the ways that we can sort of quantify our success, is looking at these analytics and seeing, okay, we are getting more new subscribers, or we've kind of plateaued. If we're losing subscribers, we know we need to make some changes. So yeah, that's one of the things that I have sort of been identifying as ways we can measure our success And that starts right now with just measuring where we are. So, and with that, I think I can open it up to questions or comments, concerns.
Here's JC.
I thought those pictures were, I think those make a difference. They look pretty professional to
Yeah.
me, that last one. So
Mhm.
I don't know if you have background in photography, if you did those, but I do think it makes a difference on brochures or information we're getting out. Like those pictures look pretty darn good.
Yeah,
And I think it makes a difference. The other interesting thing is we mentioned Albert and Sheldon. Those are important communities to us, and I'm sure showing that those communities the best that we have to offer and stuff like that will really help. And kind of the scary thing with social media right now is it can target groups pretty well, but just a thought, because that. And the other thing I thought of when I was like with student newspaper, I don't know if that would dovetail into you. I don't think we've been years, maybe we've had in the past. I don't think if we ever talked about that, but I noticed some of our surrounding schools have that. I think that's an opportunity. I would like to see. I mean, it's easy for me to say, but at the high school level or even at the elementary schools, but
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I've actually been talking to Kosha about is ways to implement school newspaper and use that as a way to both generate content that goes out into the community as well as, just the good work that would be for our students and the learning opportunity for them. And I think that there's definitely room to pursue that stuff. I think that because it wasn't one of the major themes that came up, it didn't seem to me like one of the primary priorities to focus on. But definitely as things like the website gets cleaned up, that's going to make room for more projects like that, and we can sort of expand the scope of communications and what we do in the district. Yes.
I was gonna say, that is a pretty ambitious first 6 months. There's a lot there.
Well, yes, that's I bit off a lot, and I have the optimism to do that because this is a brand new role. And like I mentioned, it's new for the district. It's also new for me. So I'm betting on myself, and we'll see how it turns out.
Hey, I'm happy that it's an ambitious 6 months. I think it sounds great. I do have one question, because everything looks so great. And I love the way you did construction approved, because I was wondering how we had communicated that. And I thought that picture with construction approved was really good. I know you, and the reason I say it's so ambitious, because here I am asking you for something else. And that is, you have social media, and I'm just wondering, because I asked somebody today, have you heard anything about this? Were you notified about it? No. And they're probably not on Facebook, so I just wondered, how are we do you have anything in that 6 months plan to reach out to people that kind of, I don't know, I'm not going to use the word, but older?
Yes, there's definitely, internet connectivity is still an issue in our district, and it's going to continue to be for years. And that is, in my plan, social media is something that is easily turned into numbers. And so that's why I think it's an important metric to sort of just keep following, but I do have plans. For example, with the fill out the form campaign that the AOE has kind of rolled out, they really want us to drum up numbers of people filling out their meal forms for the district. And one of the things I was considering for that was just getting on the agenda at the select board meetings around the district, just to have that conversation, answer any questions if they have them. I know many of the select board members are older, they may not have students in district, but families, they may communicate with families, they might have grandkids, that sort of thing, just getting it out into the zeitgeist in person.
One thing to add though is, for some reason, they may have thought it was too complicated, but people really loved getting that postcard that we sent them. I've heard so many comments that people really loved that postcard. Of course, they thought it was way too complex, and they'd like it to be way simpler, and for us to have somebody we tested on before we send it out next time that doesn't know as much as about what's going on as we do at the table here. But I think it really made a huge difference. I know we can say it's expensive, but I think it's well worth us spending money to get to be able to really reach everyone in the community.
Yeah, and if we determine that that is, worth the expense, like you say, that's something that I definitely want to have a hand in, sort of generating the graphic design of it and making sure that it is readable and understandable to everybody in the community.
Laura, do you have a sense, or do you recall how much it costs to send?
Over $3,000.
$3,000. Okay, I think that was.
There's postage and everything.
Yeah. Okay. But I think we all heard, a few of us anyway, heard that maybe reached more people than some of the other things. So we may want to consider doing that a little more frequently. Don?
I'm really pleased by C. I think we're off to a great start. Just a couple of things I'd like to share with you. You talked about newspapers. I hope that includes the County Courier. You know, I go into one of the little quick stops about 6 times a week. I find the County Courier does jump off the shelves. It's only a weekly, but I think it gets us a group of people who may not be into buying a daily paper. The other thing is, I'm on the Board of Civil Authority. And I know tonight we're not talking about budget, we're talking about how great our school is and all the wonderful things we're doing for students. But if we don't get the word out so people vote yes on our budget, then all those wonderful ideas go nowhere. And maybe it's because of my age, but I interact with a lot of people that are 50, 60 plus, and they aren't really into a lot of social media. I mean, my wife keeps me informed, and I'm on the computer every day because I have a business. But I could tell you 50 people in the Swan area who are really good and they're into business and they're stalwart citizens. And we gotta have the postcards, we gotta have a one-page flyer in some of the quick stops because they don't go on the computer. They don't go on Facebook, they don't do social media. And I will tell you, they do vote.
Mm-hmm.
There are many of my daughter's friends who may be in their 30s and 40s, who don't show up at polls. I can tell you that if you're 60 or 70 or more, high percentage of turnouts at the polls. So there's 2 things. I don't want this to turn into we want to pass the budget. But I'm smart enough to know that if you don't let people know the good things you're doing, they can't vote to support them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Courier is definitely on my list. I'm still establishing a lot of processes. Like I said, I started really in earnest in August doing this work, and I'm still establishing ways to verify that students have photo permissions and stuff like that. So when I am putting content together, which I think is going to happen a lot more often in October, then it can go out to the Courier, to the Digger, to the Islander, as well as the Messenger. You know, all of these outlets. I definitely want to at least give them the option to be reporting on us as often as they can, in a way that's is sending the message that we want to send.
I hope one trap you don't fall into is that you're expected to do it all. Use us as board members. You know, many times, and other board members, we are elected by the public to take and have oversight of the school and make sure it's adequately funded. And I think sometimes it's easy to rationalize, they're busy, they're volunteers to a certain extent. And as good as you may be, and it appears you're very good, and other people, you can't do it alone. So don't hesitate, at least from my point of view, but I think you keep involving the board so that the board members are engaged. They know what's going on, and tell us how we can help you.
Yeah, I appreciate the offer, and I will keep that in mind. I definitely am finding that there is more to do than there is time in the day, but I do think that is part of my sort of community outreach plans. I would like to schedule some more focus groups, things like that, and involve the board in doing that, because you are representatives from your communities and you know people in those communities, and I think that, we can definitely establish some ways that bring the public to you in a way that makes it easier for you to get your message out.
Question, Dan, do we ever do coffee with the principal or jelly donuts with the principal or something like that? Seems like we have.
Yes.
We did, yes.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, a couple years ago. Yep, and then COVID kind of shut us down, but yeah.
Anything else for JR? Alright, yep, go ahead, Joanne.
And I don't want you to feel like we're like throwing all of this on you. Again, I'm just commenting. And I have your attention, so I'm going to second what Toby said earlier, as far as, and again, this may not be you, so I'm just gonna kind of say it, I'm just gonna repeat it, as far as student newspaper. And I say that only because of what Dawn said, and I would agree also, even if we could get with the other newspapers, if the students print something, and even if it, I don't know if it would cost us something, but grandparents, parents will buy those newspapers if, students write something and there's a section in there that's written by them. And the second part, totally different, is not just me personally, not just us communicating out to the public, but it's also like, I don't know how we can get the public to communicate to us. So we need to hear, there were just things that were brought back after, the budget didn't pass for the first time. And I'll be honest with you, I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know the public felt that way. So it needs, I think personally, it needs to be a two-way communication, not just us feeding positive communication, but we need to hear what's being said. And I am not on Facebook,
I think that's brilliant.
and I'm not over 50.
Are you bragging or complaining?
I don't know, that's a good question.
Yeah, that.
So, can I just say something though? I think every member of this board should be using these outlets themselves. I mean, obviously everyone has their own personal opinion on it, but this is how things are communicated most of the time to most people. And whatever the medium is, I just think they should be used. Because I have people that message me, hey, I'm trying to zoom in, and they just message me, right? And so I think it's important though that if we want something like that, we do that as board members, like Donna was saying, we have a responsibility. I think we do, and if we don't want to do that, then if you want to post in the post offices with signs with your name and say, hey, get a hold of me. I think we do have to actively find ways to do that constantly, so that it is a two-way street.
And Toby's good at doing that.
Yes, I do that a lot too. But I did want to ask, so for our Facebook, are you now an admin on the school, the district's page?
Yes, on the district page.
So when you are putting things out, are those your ideas, or you're vetting them through Julie or someone else?
Yeah, so most of what I've done so far is sharing stuff from the school Facebook pages, which are run by the approved people at the schools. I do try to post original content on a weekly basis, and that I do send to Julie just to run it by her, make sure that there's nothing in here that's I've used some sort of trigger word or something that's going to cause some public backlash. But for the few weeks that we've started, so far it's been pretty good.
So as a primary shift, is that you're taking over that as that's part of the role?
Yes, a big part of the role is to create content and share regularly so that we're increasing traffic on our sites and our social media presence. Where I would do that once in a while when there was a particular topic. And that doesn't build interest. That's, and I didn't have the capacity to do that. In the schools, some of the principals have more of a social media focus, and others don't. But having JR here can help facilitate or bolster that for places where they don't.
I can also, because I am creating content, I am sharing that content with the schools. Highgate has used a lot of my photos on their Facebook feed. And yeah, it's just sort of like, it allows everybody, and it saves time so that Yeshua, for example, who's the principal at Highgate, also runs their Facebook page. When I just send him stuff to do, that frees up his time so that he can attend to his administrative duties.
So that's a pretty good segue, just listening to the approval process that happens there for district level communications. The other thing that we need to address ourselves is board level communications. Terry, you mentioned you hadn't seen the construction approved notice, because that came as a comment in our previous meeting from one member saying we should do this, and I think the administrative team was then left wondering, was this the will of the board or of that member? And who's to say this can be put out on behalf of the board? And so we have our annual motions where we allow the chair and vice chair to sign contracts. If folks here are amenable, I would suggest maybe we make the same motion now so that we do have that in place for board communications for the chair or vice chair to be able to approve those would be my suggestion. So.
What do you have?
To somebody that can sign off on communications that are on behalf of the board, because none of us on our own have the authority to speak on behalf of the board, even in a post. And so in order to say somebody can sign off on it, we as a group have to delegate that authority through motion.
So, like what you're saying here is, if someone requested that at the last meeting, and then if you and Don, who are designated people, if you say, yeah, we agree with that, then you can sign it. If you say, no, we're not gonna do it, it wouldn't happen, or would there be some other process in there?
So I would envision it as somebody drafting, I don't know who, right? Somebody drafting is something on the behalf of the board. So say we wanna put out a bi-weekly board notes to the community. Somebody's gonna write that up and put some things in it. And before JR and Julie post that to Facebook or send out the flyer, they're gonna want a final approval. So who's the person signing off on that thing?
Oh, I see.
So that's what I think we're looking for, is just delegate that to someone to be able to sign off on that.
What about the other one?
What's that?
What about the other situation where we've got one or two board members that ask for something?
Oh yeah, I mean, the chair can always be overridden in any situation by the majority of the board.
But if we don't have a board meeting, is what I guess.
Right, we'd have to wait till the next board
Okay,
meeting
that's what it is,
and
okay.
get that.
Or
on
decide
there.
it that night if someone throws out something like
Correct,
that, we
yeah.
have to say, wait, are we gonna do this or not?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that would just be for the expediency and
Yeah.
logistics for the admin team.
I think that's, I'd be
I
happy
think it's
to.
a good idea, but it may lead us to think, as this thing grows, we may want a communications committee, just like we have other committees. But for now, let's do what you're saying, okay?
Yeah.
I'd like to give this gentleman an idea coming up real quick, and I know you're real busy. But John, 15, 20 minutes ago, you talked about Spirit Week coming up, right? I'm going to tell you that we didn't do it last year, right, or did we?
We did the parade, but we didn't do the spirit.
Okay, right. But when we've done it in the parade, I cannot tell you how many people I have seen the next day who said, I didn't know that was happening, and then I heard a sound, and then I had to run and find a place. So that engages a whole nother group of people that probably we don't engage any other time to go out and see a parade of our students and see what they can do. So that might be something to just consider. I know it's tight scheduling, but it's amazing how many people line the streets.
Right.
And they know about it.
Well, we were talking about the calendar, but even more so, I think it's a real shift to get our administrators and the people in our buildings to, it's gonna take a little time so that they start to say, oh, we've scheduled the parade and Spirit Week, I'm gonna let JR know so that he can promote it, or that kind of thing. So we need to start making sure that things that are happening in the schools go to him so that we can promote them and get people to see what's happening or attend or whatever that is.
Yeah.
More than just even the calendar of events. It's a little bigger than that, because we want the calendar, but then some things we might want to push, because we want people to line the streets to support our student athletes, for example.
Yeah, and I will say that the MVU as a group has been really great about providing me with dates and that information. So I did know that next week is Spirit Week, and that's why this week, as I'm going into classrooms, I'm focusing on trying to visit during social studies time to sort of get some content that's history related, so that next week when I'm doing social media posts, etc., it can have that sort of like, this is our heritage focus, we're doing Spirit Week, it's homecoming this weekend, the parade is this day, that sort of thing. And yeah, so that is part of the plan, but like Julie says, there are definitely a lot of events that aren't yet on my radar, and that's the sort of thing that we want on the calendar, but also we want to have enough headroom to sort of promote it. Gather the content ahead of time so that we can promote it in a time.
So, in the interest of time, this has been great.
I make that motion.
Okay, Terry's made a motion to allow the chair or vice chair to approve board communications, board communications.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Joanne's a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Just real quick, whenever there's like a communication that goes out, is it always gonna say the board or a majority of the board? In case that there's issues where, let's say there was a disagreement, or like a school or something.
I'm not sure technically there's a difference.
Right.
Because the board is a single body.
Right. Well, in the construction project, it didn't say anything.
Right.
It just said, it just was an announcement.
Right. So, I mean, the thing on the top of my mind is a periodic update from the board where we can tell the community about our priorities and upcoming agenda items and that kind of thing. So that'd be I think the majority of this stuff. Peter?
So, is this information coming from our board meetings?
Could be.
Because I guess my concern is, and I have no problem, with your judgment or anything like that. It's just, if stuff comes out and I as a board member don't know anything about it, that would be a concern for me.
Yeah, I think if it's communication from the board, it has to be something that board members are aware of. Either, like I said, priorities of the board that we've already come up with and are emphasizing, or things that have occurred, or our future agenda items. And I hear what you're saying. It would need to be appropriate to be on the board.
And I'm hoping that we'll use it for things that we're looking at too. Maybe we haven't made decisions on yet. Things that, this is, I mean, we have our minutes, but I really like this idea when you brought it to me, that we send out these notes that everybody can read and they're more publicized, and maybe somebody sees something there, I want to know more about that. And maybe they'll participate or at least keep an eye out for what's going on. So, I support it. I just want to make sure that we don't get away from what we're doing as a board.
Right. Yeah. Alright, any other comments, discussion?
This would all be, just real quick, this is separate from the individual board member sharing the information that they have.
That's correct. This would be separate. Individual board members are free to communicate as individuals however they see fit. Any other discussion? Alright, those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Alright, we are well past time, so I'll say if there are any closing thoughts for JR for the whole board, now would be okay. Otherwise, if it's specific things or questions or ideas, feel free to communicate offline. Appreciate this very much, Julie, JR. It's an excellent first step here.
Thank you.
Great.
And this is really helpful for him as well, so he can help reshape everything we're doing.
Absolutely.
This is very good. because Peter just touched on something. Occasionally, the board gets out of, committees get out of the full board. It's really embarrassing. I know Chet Spivey was here, used to say, I heard it on the street. She figures I spend a lot of time on the street. But it is embarrassing on something like that. And so it was good to have it here, not to hear it at the post office. Oh, I saw that you guys have a public relations communications director. When did that? So it's good.
All right, we'll move along now. Policy review and prioritization is up next.
Yes.
Just some background first.
What?
Julie and I were discussing how we were gonna address policies going forward this year. Whether that was still part of the goals committee, or if members wanted to handle those a little differently, so that's up for discussion, as well as what Julie is gonna show us.
Good. So first I wanted to show the work that the board did. And I'm going to share again. Pardon me. So what I did is the Vermont School Board Association has a map of all of the policies mandated, recommended, and for consideration. And I made a copy and I changed it to reflect our district. I highlighted all the policies we have in yellow. I've highlighted all of those that we don't have yet are in blue, and there are links there to a PDF of those policies. I think I did something like this last year. And then if they've been removed, they're black like this. And if they are under review, which means they're being reviewed by attorneys, they're grayed out. So I wanted to share with you, they're
Julie,
please.
so the ones crossed out, those were policies that we had that are removed, or?
No, Vermont, the model policy manual. This is like a map of the model policy manual. The VSBA has removed those policies.
So those are policies they used to recommend, they don't anymore?
They've been removed.
Okay.
A lot of them are old and need to be revised. Some of them have been revised, some of them are unnecessary. So I wanted to share with you what we did so far. I was going to do a PowerPoint presentation, but then my whole afternoon went to an issue that had to be addressed. So I apologize for that. I want to look at what we've done, share those that we haven't done. I have a survey created for you all and the administrative team so we can prioritize those that we don't have. What are the ones that you'd like us to tackle first? And then discuss whether we want to do them as a whole board in some of our agenda items, maybe spend half an hour discussing a particular policy, or do we want to have board development, board goals do it? Do you want a policy committee that can meet virtually or something? It's up for you to decide. So, just visually so you can see, and they're divided up into the different areas. Students are, you've got board policies, you've got personnel policies. Students, you can see all the yellow are what we have. You did a lot of work over the last year to address those. The red one is just one that you mentioned you want to address. And the librarians have asked for it as well. And then there's another one that is a newly mandated policy that I also put in red. But you can see that we have a lot of good policy work has happened. So I've put this in the folder for you. I can send it as an email link to anybody who wants that.
Which folder do you?
I put it in today's folder this afternoon because I was still working on it this morning. And then I also am putting it in our, and I would actually be happy. Here's your board folder. And Deb and I have been numbering the board meetings this way, starting with year, month, date, so that they will be sequential. And then we have archived meetings, and then we have documents for board members. So anytime you're thinking, whatever happened to that presentation they gave or whatever, I am trying to put them in here. So the ARPESER information, as we have board development documents that happen, portrait of a graduate. I created a folder for policy development for the board too, and so I did put it in there. Just quickly wanted to show you that. I also have somewhere down here. Oh, I went too far. I backed out too far, folks, sorry. Why is the internet being slow? Anyway, I also wanted to point out that, you know, Guide to Open Meetings and our vision are in there as well, so that you can see them at any time. Okay, so let me go back.
No, not yet, right? Is ours supposed to look like that right now?
Well, for the layout.
It has to do with your layout,
Yeah.
and if you have, and that could be something that we do, maybe between the two board meetings.
His layout's totally different than mine.
Right, and I think Steve's is as well. And I think that if you set it up a certain way, so that might be something where we have a little technical assistance in between maybe the first meeting and the second, we could do that. And set up people's views so it's easier to find things.
My iPad's easier.
It can be difficult depending on the device you use too.
Yeah, this is much easier.
So,
Are we ready to
I'm ready to
kick it
get
over
back.
the board?
Yes.
So the question for us is, how do we want to tackle these policies this year? Are there any thoughts or preferences out there? Terry?
I have preference as part of the committee.
Sure.
I prefer it not be part of that committee.
Okay.
I would prefer it to be something like you all are talking about, with the file and offline and not meet in person, but do it.
As a non-member of your committee, I agree with you. That I think we keep talking about we want to reach out to the public, we want to keep the public informed. People are used to knowing we do have board meetings, but I don't think a lot of people are quite engaged at the same level with committee meetings. And so I think it's worth, whether it be 20 minutes or 30 minutes, once a month or twice a month, and people will get it out there. It's pretty dry, boring stuff, but there are people out there that like dry, boring stuff. My wife being one of them, but anyway, she's out of state, so I can say that to her. But anyway, I just think it's good for the board to say these are policies, these are issues that we deal with and guide us, and let the public hear it.
Peter?
This will sound strange because I'm not on the committee and I wish it would stay on the committee.
Doesn't sound strange at all.
No, I just feel that, and I have participated in those meetings, and I just don't think that we can get into the meat of it as well as we can in the committee. I just enjoy that we can really go through it. And as I say, I'm not on that committee, and so I don't get in all those discussions, but I also feel better when it comes to the board, knowing that board members have vetted it. And I still have an opportunity to ask questions or if there's things I don't understand. So I think it works well on committee. I understand it takes a lot of time in committee, so I understand if you don't want to, but I do like that process.
I agree with everything Peter just said. I think the policy committee is needed, and that's where the good discussions happen. And yeah, so more work for the policy committee, and I'm not on either.
I guess I'm a little confused, because we're talking about a different committee, right? We're not.
Right,
No.
it
No.
would have to be, so that I'm
It's
sorry.
just being called by different names. It's the board goals, development,
I was thinking board
policy.
goals can be a committee, policy can be a
Okay,
committee.
so then
Joanne?
we need to meet twice a month.
No. No.
Well,
Come out loud.
So I'm sorry, we, as a board goals committee, we easily spend an hour and a half on 2 or 3 policies.
Agreed.
So we're not reviewing anything else so then we need to discuss this at our next
So-
board goals policy committee.
Well, I would just say I think it makes sense to stay on the board for the policy committee. I mean, I think this is important what we do. But it would just be sort of like an annual thing, whether it's like a month where we're saying, hey, we're just gonna tackle policies. And that's what we do. I don't think it should be like a year-round thing that unless there's a specific one that comes up that's needed. But I just think sort of like last year, it should be, okay, let's review them. This is a time, and then that way it's not like an all-year thing.
It's very infrequent. The reason why I said no.
It's because you already meet 10 times a month with a whole
Yeah.
bunch of other committees, so I understand why you said it.
Plus I'm on a task force or two. But I think Rennick is right. We had one meeting where we discussed a policy for a long time because it was a very long state policy that was very complex. Most of these policies are a page and a half. They've been vetted by attorneys. If it's something we need to change, we change. It really doesn't take very long for us to do it. I think the big work is for me to send out that survey to all of you and to the administrators to prioritize what are the ones we want to really try and accomplish this year, and then we put them on a schedule and get them done, because most of them are very straightforward with legal precedent. There's really not a lot of discussion or tweaking that we do too much. There may be some, and then we would work with the committee to say, well, I think we need to look at this particular one, or we could just line them up for the year.
So are you suggesting to do them in a batch, like Rennick said, where we devote maybe one board goals committee meeting to a half a dozen policies, and then one full board meeting to those policies, or are you suggesting still doing them periodically?
We could do what we could do is potentially have a board goals meeting, have a committee, what we're gonna call your committee. And that's the agenda we're gonna prioritize. We're gonna say we wanna start with these, and then we wanna line up the rest for the year. And then most of them could be looked at. And then to Dawn's point, we could do a first reading, especially if there are some we want to really talk about publicly, to emphasize, then that could be done in a discussion part of the meeting. Here are 3 policies that we're going to put up on the website to warn, and then eventually at a business meeting, you probably just adopt them after all the input happens. But it might be a combination of both things.
Sarah?
We do have some that come up. For example, we said we were gonna do a dedication policy,
That's right.
and so that we gotta add that to dedication policy. And the flag policy, I mean, there are some that come up during the year, and those I think are the ones that take so long.
Yes.
But I think it's probably, I'm with you all. I'll do whatever needs to be done. I like the idea if we are meeting, because we have something particularly long to do, we could just do like a half-hour meeting that whoever can come, and we discuss it online, via Zoom or Hangout or something.
So my quick thought is reviewing policies that have already been adopted.
Yeah.
Should be relatively smooth,
Yes.
although the policy committee is so great that sometimes what we think is gonna be easy turns out to be 30 minutes, but that's good. But in theory, all those that we've already adopted should be pretty quick, slam dunk. Like, if nothing's changed, nothing's changed. The more interesting things are like the dedication memorial.
Right.
Like that one is ripe for great discussion. And those you can't predict, they come up. Like I really think we need that because we went through something at Swanton with it, and I just think it's great to have something
It
like
is
that
good
on the
policy.
books. So I don't know, I was just throwing that out as like, I don't think it necessarily has to be as much of a bear as it might appear. Because if
I mean, we only have to adopt as many as we want to adopt, new. So if we only want to do three a year, then, or 2 a year, that's fine.
What if we do the survey to prioritize? We could do, pick some of those to do a first reading of. And if there are comments or after the first reading we feel there needs to be discussion on some, we kick those to the committee. And that way we're not putting everything through the committee, but we still get a chance to do that for the ones we need to.
I think that's a great idea. And just so I'm tracking through, so are there expiration dates on some of these that will have to be renewed?
We need to have a schedule of reviewing them, which makes sense. There's one policy in there that is so old that I wouldn't recommend you even look at it. But for the most part, they get updated, and so it's up to me to look and see, oh, they've updated this one. Oh, this is a new mandated policy. You all get those too in your Vermont School Board Association updates. There is the Title I policy, the Community Engagement Title I policy, has to be reviewed annually. So I'll work with COSHA on making sure you just adopted it. So we won't probably be making changes, but we'll look at it with our admin team. We'll bring it to you to re-adopt in probably October. But in general, there was at least one policy on the list that has been rewritten since we adopted ours. So then we would probably look at it to see if there's any big change or not. So that is a part of the cycle.
And we can break it down into tiers because currently we have all the policies required, and then if we want to add some of the recommended,
Right.
we can review that. And
Does it make sense to us? Is it really important or not? That's why I put links to them so you could look at them.
pretty sure I read through all of them.
Of course you did. I know you did.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
So,
I will send that out in an email, and I will also send this document with it so that anybody who needs it that way, we can make sure they have it.
perfect. Alright, everybody content with that plan? Alright. Okay, we'll move right along. The next item on the agenda is, agenda here, MVU safety planning.
Yes.
Is there anything for public session?
Yes, Steve has put together a presentation that I will share, and then I'll put in a drive for you afterwards. And I did ask Steve, this is for public. And then if there are any questions, you can make a finding for executive session.
Okay, very good.
I'm gonna share again, I feel like that's.
Well, good evening, everyone. Everybody's favorite topic, right? School safety and security. So what I did here is kind of broke things out a little bit. In my mind, there's kind of two different components when we're talking about general building and school safety. So the first piece of that is really talking about building security. So kind of the facilities, some of the infrastructure things that we've done over the last couple of years. So just again, many of you are already kind of familiar with some of these projects and the things that we've done. So some physical improvements to our campus, the front lobby, and that whole kind of hardening of that area and securing of that area was pretty significant a few years ago. The J-Pod connector obviously is a big piece of kind of enhancing our general security and safety within the building. And then Jason and his team and Paul before him have worked and continue to work on updating some of our exterior doors, just kind of increasing the functionality and the safety of those. And we are currently in the process, so a little context around our video system. So we actually have two systems right now. We have something called IC Real Time, which is a majority of our internal cameras in the school. And then we have a program called the Vigilon, which is all of the cameras that are in that front vestibule area in the front lobby, and then all of our, or I should say many, if not all of our exterior cameras. So as you can imagine, not having everything on one system can be a bit of a struggle at times. So Jason and Sylvia and Derek are in the process of kind of consolidating those two systems to one, just for efficiency's sake, and just kind of Quite frankly, I see real-time isn't super user-friendly, so just going through that process, and that's going to take some time. We also, going back several years, we had something initially called Raptor, which was our visitor management system. About 3 years ago, or maybe 4 years ago now, we switched over to something called Identikit. So again, kind of a physical tool that we have in the front lobby, where whoever is up at the front, Joanne or whoever else, would be kind of physically checking and scanning people's IDs as they come in. So that's connected to our sex offender registry, the national registry, and does some general background checks as well. That'll give them actually a printed out badge for everybody who's in the building throughout the course of the school day. In addition to that, over the last couple of years, and again, kind of pre-COVID, we began alarming some of our exterior doors in the building. And so not every single one of our exterior doors does have an alarm, but many of them do. Some of our kind of high traffic areas, doors down by the gym, the weight room, kind of the E and F pod areas where at times, quite frankly, students tend to leak out and maybe, the doors don't get closed all the way. So we decided to kind of alarm those and again, try to funnel all of our students, that traffic in and out of that hardened front lobby and vestibule area. So those were kind of the big ticket items. There's many more that we didn't really capture there, but those are kind of some of the general pieces that we've done from an infrastructure standpoint over the last couple of years as it relates to kind of building security. And then in broad terms, our school safety process is pretty comprehensive and obviously more than we're going to be able to get into in great detail here tonight. But one of the things that I'm really proud of that we've done as a school over the last several years is really enhanced and increased our partnership with local law enforcement. So not just our SROs from Swamp Police, but working closely with our state police and sheriff partners, working with our border patrol agents who are oftentimes potentially first on scene given the circumstance. So just continuing to do that, having them help participate in some of those conversations around how do we enhance some of our relocation events, or when something, whether it's a drill or an actual crisis happens, having law enforcement to kind of partner with and help kind of work on increasing our process to make sure it's the most efficient and most safe. And kind of connected to that, we do have a pretty comprehensive EOP, our Emergency Operations Plan. Not something that is a public-facing document, obviously, for a variety of different reasons, but not only does it kind of capture all of the day-to-day things that we're doing as a school, but does have a pretty significant plan for each individual instance of some type of emergent event. So it could be an active shooter situation, could be a chemical spill, or any of 100 other type of events that would otherwise prompt us to initiate that type of response. Within that, and kind of going back to that initial point of working with first responders and law enforcement, we are in the process of updating our reunification process for an event. Again, some of the details within that EOP aren't necessarily public facing, so if you have questions about what that looks like, we can talk in executive session about that, but we are in the process and have had those conversations for the last couple of years about making sure that our response, should an event or some type of crisis happen, that we've got a pretty solid plan in place, and we know that kind of our incident command process, both from a law enforcement standpoint and then from a school administration standpoint, is really buttoned up and tight. And then another piece, obviously, so we've been using our ALICE School Crisis Response Program for quite a few years now. I think 7 or 8 years now we've been using ALICE. So myself, Bob Corey, and Jason Barney are all certified instructors in ALICE. And that's something, again, that's district-wide, so all of our schools are familiar with that. I'm sure other schools have talked about that a little bit. But we do a little bit of a twofold process right now. So at the beginning of our school year, I did a training with all of our new staff around kind of, if they're not familiar with ALICE, really giving them a comprehensive walkthrough of what that entails and kind of what their, not only what their responsibilities are, but ultimately what discretion they have when it comes to an emergency situation and kind of what their plan could be. And then we also do, as part of our mandatory training for returning staff, Bob Corey has kind of a video review that he kind of walks people through just to kind of update that and make sure that people are familiar with everything that is kind of contained within that ALICE plan and process. One of the things that actually Justina, Jeanette, and I from Swan Elementary, she's also one of our trainers in the district. We just had a call with some of the folks from Atlas last week. They have something called blended learning. So it's kind of a program where they not only have kind of those in-person instructors and certified trainers, but they also do some online learning that's a little bit more comprehensive and a little bit more routine and regular throughout the course of the year. There's a lot that goes into that, and it's not something that we're ready to kind of run with just yet, but something that we're looking at and exploring, because it does, it has a lot of benefits, obviously, because it's kind of up in everybody's, in their face to a certain degree over the course of the school year, a little bit more regularly than just that annual in-service time. The other piece that's nice and something that we're kind of reaching out and trying to learn a little bit more, they have something called an organizational certification. So if you have a certain percentage of your staff that are trained in ALICE, you have ALICE included as a part of your EOP, and then you have regular trainings that you can document. You can become a certified organization. There are some potential insurance benefits to that. So again, not something that we're ready to roll out just yet, but I mentioned because it's part of our kind of long-term plan as it relates to school safety. And then the last two pieces, I'll kind of skip down to the bottom. So a few years ago, we instituted a program called the BARC Software Monitoring and Web Filtering Service. So every school device, every kind of one-to-one device that we have our students and staff use, and any account that's connected to our Google Suite of information goes through this web filtering service. So obviously there's a school safety component to that. If there's certain words that are kind of flagged or triggered as it relates to some type of active targeted violence, or what we actually see a little bit more for that program are issues of bullying and harassment, or kind of general student conduct or peer-to-peer issues that are kind of brought to our awareness so that we can kind of process and follow up. But again, there is kind of that general school safety piece in there as well, so I wanted to include that. And then you'll see we do have something that's called a behavioral threat assessment team. So not a team or a group that meets routinely, but as necessary if we have a concern that's presented to us, and it could be, very often it has been some type of student concern, so a threat that's made or a potential conduct that we might want to review. That group has gone through a pretty comprehensive process to not just identify the threat, but really kind of create a case management plan, determine if the threat is valid, and the steps that we need to take as a school administration or law enforcement, depending on the situation, to kind of go through that process. That's something actually that has been done for the last several years. Sigma Threat Management Associates have done that training through,
I just sent a training out to everybody.
I was going to say, so Julie and I think a couple other members of our school-based team are going to be participating in that. It's through VSBIT.
It is VSBIT, yep.
And again, so that's through the recommendation of the Vermont School Safety and Crisis Team. So again, something that's been in place for several years and something that we got on board pretty early on in. Again, not something that meets regularly. I think over the course of the last handful of years, it's less than a half a dozen times we've needed to kind of institute that process, thankfully. But it is a pretty comprehensive review of concerning information and conduct that we kind of go through in order to make a case management plan. A few things that I talked a little bit about the blended learning process with Navigate 360 and ALICE. One of the things that we identified last spring, and again, in working with our partners from law enforcement and first response, is that we do not really have a great system of identifying interior and exterior doors. So as we kind of began walking some of those law enforcement folks through this building, as you can imagine, this building poses a whole variety of challenges for law enforcement if they're attempting to clear it and keep it safe. One of the things that they pretty clearly identified was we don't number our doors. You know, if you're not familiar with a building, you don't know where D12 is, right? You don't know where B6 is. So we're going through the process right now of clearly marking and identifying all of our interior doors, and then also numbering all of our exterior doors. So again, if you're a first responder coming onto campus, you've got a better sense of where you're going, where the threat is, how to get there as quickly as possible. Again, we're conducting drills every month. So the state AOE actually revised their drill schedule this summer for this school year. In all previous years, we would do what we would call kind of a traditional emergency drill, so like a fire drill, and then we would also do some type of crisis evacuation drill. So you do both of those in the month of September, and then beginning in October, you alternate each one of those types of drills throughout the course of the rest of the year. They've actually reduced the number of mandated drills. So there's a few months where there's not anything that we have to schedule. In conversations with our team, I think we're going to do something even on those on those empty months, so to speak. But I think we're going to get creative as to what that looks like, and hopefully do something that's a little bit more comprehensive than just kind of that traditional drill process. But we've also talked about doing a little bit more of a comprehensive drill. A few years ago, folks from Northwestern Medical Center reached out and wanted to do an actual like a mass casualty training with us, not during the school day or when anybody is here, but obviously, as you can imagine, that takes a fair amount of pretty comprehensive planning with a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different organizations. So something that's still kind of on the forefront of some short and long-term planning. So we'll probably start a little bit smaller than that, do some tabletop exercises within the folks here to include some of our law enforcement partners, but then also kind of moving towards an eventual kind of large scale, a little bit more of a comprehensive process that includes Missisquoi Valley Rescue, AmCare, the hospital, all of those kind of community partners. And that's, again, a really quick, high-level, 30,000-foot view overview of kind of the different things that we've got going on. But again, if you have specific questions about the EOP, because it's not something that we publicly share, given the sensitive nature of that, happy to kind of walk through that and give more detail.
All right, does anyone have any questions for public session? I think we will have a finding to go into executive session to discuss the emergency operations plan. For more detailed questions, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be an issue, but so the training or the rehearsals that you have, do you scatter those, like, so they're not always at the same time of day, so that different classes, different?
Yeah, so some of the feedback that we've gotten from teachers is it's great if it's not the same class or section that I'm getting interrupted with every month, right? So yeah, we do our best to alternate A and B day, alternate time of the day, morning, afternoon. One of the things that we've kind of steered away from is trying to do some of those drills during lunch, just because it can become so disruptive and otherwise chaotic and really shifts the whole day for pretty much everybody in the building. Also knowing that if there's some type of targeted act of violence, it's just as likely to happen then. So that is something that we're going to eventually have to plan for and ultimately drill during the course of those days, that time of day as well.
I had a question. It has something to do with the teach. I don't remember Mvsd, I think you called it, and when it talked about a student or teacher might feel a threat, and I'm just thinking back when we did our negotiations with the teacher negotiations, and that was one of the things that came up in terms of teachers feeling threatened that they wanted something in their contract. I'm just curious, how does it get? We have a system now where they can do, right, Bonnie, where they can make out a complaint and that whole
We're
thing.
still working on it with the union, but yes.
Okay, so it's almost there.
You can pay them that extra $40 during that threat. It's probably better.
To Polly. But I'm just wondering, how do we escalate it up to the, what's the system for escalating a teacher's concern to something more serious?
So just so I'm clear, so like if a teacher was concerned about student conduct directed towards them or just in general?
Either.
So
mostly towards them.
Yeah, the hope would be that they would communicate that to one of, either Christy or Dan or some other member of the administrative team, just so that A, they're aware, and then B, we can kind of go through that behavioral threat assessment process.
Thank you.
John?
I guess this is a question of a couple of people, but I appreciate what you're doing and going through this. I know we mentioned administrators, but how involved is this gentleman behind me as we talk about our school building and safety?
Very involved, and Jason's been great, and when he has come on board, actually, he was one of the members of our small group that met last spring with law enforcement around kind of planning and further, I guess, digesting the information of our emergency operations plan.
Good, thank you.
And he's very involved in the SWAT and school safety
I
kind of.
haven't been a strong board member in a couple years. I mean, he has a lot of things on his plate, like all of you do, but that's why we hired all of you, because we know you're good. But it's just good, because even though they say he's fairly new, eventually he'll know this building far better than anybody else.
Alright, we have executive session in a couple more agenda items, so we'll jump back to this. Our last couple things here, future agenda items. MVU middle school student transition. I believe that the plan is to have some new middle schoolers for us to hear from at our next meeting. That should be exciting. Personalized learning plan updates, a tech center update, and we also need to figure out who among us will be doing support staff negotiations. So
Going
that's
back to the PLP, we have a new person this year, right? Or was it a new person last year?
New person this year, Alyssa Urban.
Because that's of interest to me, but I wouldn't want to have a new person who came on in August have to report the next few months. But this person has a year under the belt.
She's new to this position this year.
No, right.
Yes.
Right. We had a new one and now we have another one.
Correct.
I got it.
Yep.
But she's not new to MVU, so it will be easier for her to talk about her intention for the year.
And our next board meeting is September 20th, right here at the MVU Library at 6:30. So now, entertain a motion to enter executive session to discuss emergency.
We're gonna be 6 o'clock again, on that. On the
6:30.
second meeting of the month, we just started at 6:30.
6:30, yep, just the single board meeting.
Is there any chance that next meeting here, we might get just a little update from the Director of Buildings, Grounds and Maintenance?
Well, maybe.
I'm gonna make him short for you.
See.
No, I just think it's, nice while we're in this building, if there's something he wants to point out, good, bad, or different, that we do it.
Pictures of
Yeah.
them. Pictures of them.
Yep, that's a good note, Sean, thank you. All right, so, what was I saying? Entertain a motion to enter executive session to talk about emergency operations plan, where premature knowledge would put one party at a substantial disadvantage. Is there a motion? Terry's first. Is there a second? Rennick's second. Any discussion?
Who are you inviting in?
I'd like to invite in Julie, Christy, Dan, Steve, and also Jason. Yes, okay, and Jason. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 7-0. We're in executive session at 8:17.